Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Truckers Podcast. FYI, I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. It is the 22nd August at 8:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Disinformation creates doubts, confounds the truth. Thank you for joining me. Well, good evening. How is everybody doing this fine Tuesday evening, the 22nd of August? Almost hump day. Tomorrow, Wednesday, being hump day. Now, just to get this out again, for people across Canada, people all across Ontario, school begins on September the 5th. Start driving accordingly. Put your cell phones away. Obey the school zone speed limits. And watch out for the children who are returning back to school on September the 5th. Get into that routine now by paying attention on our area roads. Sunday, I did two shows, one in the morning and one in the evening. Last night, I did not do a show Monday night. I will be doing a show tonight, obviously, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then again, two shows on Sunday in the morning and in the evening, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then it gives me time to find information and it gives me time to fact check that information, all the credibility, whether the stories are true or not. Because I don't spread misinformation and I don't spread disinformation. Misinformation versus disinformation. Get informed on the difference. And there's some things behind this as well, talking about misinformation and disinformation. And I did a show on, was it Saturdays? No, it wasn't Saturdays. It might have been last Thursday's show or something around that time. One of the key organizers of that so-called Freedom Convoy, aka Karen Carnival, was being interviewed by Jordan Peterson, a renowned clinical psychologist here in Ontario, Canada. He's written plenty of books. He does public speaking. And the information, coming from her, disinformation coming from her on a lot of things that were happening on the ground. And then she was back at it again on the Rubin Report, which you can look up that interview. And that, so here we go. And we'll get into a little bit, about that interview that she did. Oh, by the way, she's the only one of the organizers who's doing interviews. about the so-called Freedom Convoy that took place back in January of 2022, aka the Karen Carnival. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the show, and about disinformation that creates doubts and confounds the truth. Information has real life consequences, and it can be literally a lifesaver when it's true, and unfortunately the opposite is also true. Untrue information can cause great harm. Wrong information can spread, causing what's been called an infodemic. And being an infodemic right across the spectrum, right around the world, about COVID-19, about the vaccines, and so forth. We are experiencing the spread of two forms of wrong information: misinformation and disinformation. Two words, and often used interchangeably, and only merely one letter apart. Behind that one letter hides the critical distinction between these confusable words: intent. So, what is misinformation? Misinformation is false information that is spread regardless of intent to mislead. The spread of misinformation happens often in our everyday lives because we humans, we're not perfect, and we all do make mistakes. We all forget things. We mishear or misremember details. We tell our friends, co-workers, families something we heard on TV or saw on social media that wasn't really true. So if you're spreading around information that is wrong, but you don't know that it's wrong, then you are, well, technically spreading misinformation. And when I say misinformation is an everyday thing, I mean it. Misinformation doesn't care about intent. And today's misinformation spreads very easily thanks to technology. See, back in the day growing up as a child, we met in person, we talked in person. There was no technology, there was no social media, there was no texting. We talked in person, we talked on the telephone. Not a smartphone, a telephone. If you don't know what a telephone is, you can Google search a telephone. Now, like the big tech companies like Facebook and Google should be responsible for stopping the spread of misinformation. Or even if they can without violating the First Amendment freedom of speech rights of their users. Well, we can get into freedom of speech, but we can do that at a later time. Now, where does it come from? Well, they say it comes from the late 1500s and combines information with the prefix mis, meaning wrong or mistaken, mistake, spelling, misunderstanding, are some examples of other common words. Misinformation is related to the verb misinform, which means to give wrong or misleading information. And like information, also makes no mention of why this wrong information is being spread around. Only that. Only that it is. Disinformation means false information. Decimated by a government or intelligence agency in a hostile act of tactical political subversions. It means deliberate. It means misleading or biased information. Manipulative narratives of facts and propaganda. So, disinformation is misinformation that is knowingly, intentionally spread. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, it is very powerful. It's destructive. It's decisive. And it's a common tool of espionage. Propaganda, which is information spread to make someone or something look bad. Now, although as dangerous as disinformation can, journalists find themselves in a difficult position when investigating it, while politicians might say something that is obviously not true. Journalists generally don't outright accuse them of being a liar or spreading disinformation just because journalists cannot usually 100% certain on the intent behind the misinformation. And they and all writers can be sued for libel if they wrongfully call somebody a liar. Now, when disengaging between misinformation and disinformation, keep one very important word in mind: intent. I mean, how do you plan on using misinformation and disinformation? Or did you even know that it was misinformation or disinformation? So even when it comes to reporting something, even for journalists, accuracy matters. Use the word disinformation when you know for a fact that false or erroneous information is being spread on purpose to hurt or damage, especially a government organization, a public. And if you don't know for certain why someone is spreading bad information, it's best to use misinformation. Conspiracy theories, propaganda, deep fakes, fake news, hoaxes, frauds, photoshops, scams in the digital age. Misinformation, disinformation are rampant. So to help you sort out fact from fiction, consult some of the many trustworthy guides and resources to build up your media literacy. That can help you a lot. a lot of online false information is out there. Now, of course, misinformation is everywhere online, and anyone can be vulnerable to it. Right? You may have at one point or shared an article that you believed to be true at the time, but you later discovered actually contained falsehoods or outdated information. Now, misinformation and disinformation can deceive audiences, and the distinction is that the disinformation is intentional, malicious, deceptive, and both forms are often involved widespread um, in, in or just involved in widespread, whether or not the person sharing is aware of the accuracy. Because you might just read something that just popped up on social media, thought it was interesting, and you shared it. And we do that all the time, routinely. We just share information that we see online. And the misinformation has become so prevalent online that some organizations have launched initiatives to tackle it, such as the Google News Initiative, MediaWise Teen Fact Checking Network. Now, covering, like myself, I mean, to look up articles and read the articles, or maybe watching something on social media, on YouTube, and is it true? Is it not? Who, what, where, when, and why? You know, fact check who's the source, who's the writer, what is it writing about, when did they write about it, where this story took place, and why are they writing this story, and fact check everything. Only takes a few moments to go through an article or do what you want to do to fact check stuff, instead of just pointing and clicking and sharing. So, of course, then I came across another video, and very recent video, because it's just done in the summertime here. And one of the organizers of this so-called Freedom Convoy, aka Karen Carnival, was on the Rubin Report. Again, talking about the Freedom Convoy that took place in Ottawa in 2022. And she was talking about, prominent news media outlets, and one very prominent one is the CBC. It's Canada-wide. And in the prominent news, she claims that they weren't telling the whole story about what was going on down at ground zero of the so-called Freedom Convoy. For one, they didn't allow CBC or the National or the local news station in Ottawa or any prominent news resource in when they were, having a news meeting. And who would be recording this news meeting? Who would be allowed to be in these news meetings? Well, Rebel News is a Canadian news organization. Never really heard about them because they're, to me or to anybody else, they're probably not prominent. We're going to get to that. And of course, True North. These are both far right news media outlets. And I fact checked them. I fact checked who they are. Rebel News Media Bias Fact Check. Bias in the credibility. Mixed. Questionable source. Now, a questionable source exhibits one or more of the following: extreme bias, consistent promotion of propaganda, conspiracy, poor or no source or sourcing of to credible information, a complete lack of transparency, and or is fake news. Fake news is the deliberate attempt to publish hoaxes and disinformation for profit or to influence people. Overall, they rate the Rebel News right biased and questionable based on the promotion of propaganda, conspiracy theories, poor sourcing, and several failed fact checks. And this is one of this is the only two that I can see that were allowed to be in their conferences when they're going to make a news statement. And of course, then they would share it to the outside world. Now, when it came to look, I mean, when the Emergency Act was invoked, how you doing tonight? Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. I hope you're having a great Tuesday, or maybe I don't know what time it is where you are right now, but it is 9:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in Ontario, Canada. Now, I was doing this episode on disinformation and, of course, misinformation as well that creates doubts and confounds the truth. And what's credible, what are the, what is the credible sources? Where is it coming from? Who, what, when, where, and why? And, because I think, I'm not sure what day it was. It was either last Thursday. I did an episode about one of the organizers of the so-called Freedom Convoy. She was being interviewed by Jordan Peterson, who's a prominent clinical psychologist here in Ontario, Canada. And he's on Fire, and he's written lots of books and all kinds of stuff. And then recently, this individual did another interview down in Miami, Florida, on the Rubin Report. Again, discussing her discourse, about the media, the government, and so on. And first and foremost, she has a court case coming up in September. So these videos are recent. So she's going to be in court in Ottawa, Ontario, some point in time in September, in this coming September. Her and a couple of her co-organizers of this so-called Freedom Convoy, aka Karen Carnival. Now, her, Tamara Litch, she is being charged with mischief, counseling mischief, obstructing police, counseling to counseling intimidation by blocking and or obstructing one or more roadways, and the list goes on. And this is several charges that are amongst these organizers of the so-called Freedom Convoy that took place last January 2022. And so she's on there, um, crediting, the most prominent, trusted news media sources, claiming that they weren't telling the whole story, what was going on in Ottawa and that Freedom Convoy. The media was there at ground zero, only to be harassed, intimidated, and ridiculed by protesters. To say that they weren't there telling the whole story, I mean, you could watch it around the world. There was plenty of credible news agencies around the world covering this so-called Freedom Convoy. But the two sources that she goes back to, that she feels, this is the real story from these news agencies, and one of them is Rebel News. That's here in Canada in True North. I'll just think of the title, Rebel News. So I do a fact check, and this is so important, right? This is so important to fact check something. So because you want to be careful not to spread disinformation or misinformation, right? Media bias fact check. Rebel News, bias in the credibility, right? Questionable reasoning, conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, propaganda, poor sourcing, failed fact check, bias rating right, factual reporting mixed. They're here in Canada. Now, Rebel News routinely publishes news that's loaded with emotional wording that favors the right, and such as this. Well, here's an example why Trudeau's liberals are pretending this gun control study doesn't exist, right? So, and cops and cops bundle up angry left student in tape meltdown. Both of these stories are linked to strongly right-leaning sources such as campus reform. And in general, most stories favor the right and denigrate the left, and further, according to the right-wing leaning. The National, the Rebel has been accused of stirring up anti-Muslim hate. Some writers for the Rebel have also been profiled by the left-leaning Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, when it comes to sourcing, like this is the fact check on Rebel News. The Rebel does hyperlink to outside sources, but they often attempt to source within their own domain to increase web traffic. And finally, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, they have repeatedly made false and misleading claims as evidence in the below failed fact checks in general. Right? This is a far-right media source that is not always factual. That goes the same for True North. These are the sources that, oh yes, they were so wonderful, they were great in getting the information out. Now, earlier before you came on too, she claims that there was something like 300, close to 300. Let me say this. So when the federal the emergency act was invoked by the federal government, that gave special powers to the government, and banks could freeze bank accounts. Now, she said anywhere from 280 to 300. The numbers aren't accurate. Say around roughly 200. It's hard to distinguish because some were shared bank accounts, So obviously her bank account got froze because she set up the GoFundMe. And the first $1 million went into her bank account from GoFundMe. So when the banks froze bank accounts, her bank account, all the organizers of this so-called Freedom Convoy bank accounts, any trucking corporations that supported and allowed their truckers to be involved in the so-called Freedom Convoy. If anybody donated like $5 or $10, I mean, the likelihood of your bank account being frozen was very unlikely. Right. So she's making it sound like the government went after everybody and froze everybody's bank accounts, and you couldn't go buy groceries, you couldn't pay your bills, you couldn't do this. I mean, that is not the case. Now, from the last videos that I watched of her doing these two interviews, you know, it seems to me she doesn't get it. She hasn't, as far as I'm concerned, she hasn't learned her lesson. To this very day, she still thinks what they did wasn't wrong. It may started out the way a protest starts out. There's not the first time that truckers had gone to Ottawa in 2019. 2018, 2019, truckers went to Ottawa from Alberta because Alberta is a huge source of natural gas and oil, big oil province and stuff like that. And so they went to protest the government. I think there was something like 100 trucks that went to Ottawa at that time. They had their protest, they stayed the weekend, and they left. Now, this time, this protest was over mandates and like COVID-19 mandates and restrictions, and most particularly on the federal government when they mandated that truckers and other workers that frequently cross the border, essential workers, were to be vaccinated. Now, she fails to mention that at that time, Joe Biden, the president of the United States, mandated that anybody entering the United States via land borders, non-essential or essential, have to show proof of vaccination. So the claims out there from truckers and Tamara Litch repeating it, truckers, the ones that, who are upset because they first of all, they chose not to get vaccinated. They made that decision, right? 90% of the trucking industry was vaccinated. And how do we know this? Trucking companies. Because trucking companies they're not going to risk sending their drivers into the United States and then only have to come back to Canada and then self-isolate for 14 days. So if we have something like 100, so we got 324,000 truckers in Canada. 124,000 of them cross the border between Canada and the United States. 90% are vaccinated, so you got that 10%. So you got 10. So let's say 12,000 truckers. And not all of those unvaccinated truckers, were saying they couldn't work. But they were saying that, we can't work anymore. The government took away our jobs. We can't pay our bills. We can't pay our rent. We can't pay our mortgage. We can't feed our families. I've been a trucker for 30 plus years. And I know that to be false. Right? And regardless if the federal government of Canada invocated vaccines for federally regulated companies, such as transportation. Even if he had not, Joe Biden did. So therefore, these truckers, they wouldn't be able to cross into the United States, or any essential worker wouldn't be able to cross into the United States, never mind coming back. So what then? The claim that they're unable to work and pay their bills or their rent and feed their families and stuff like that is false. We have a shortage of drivers, not a shortage of work. And if you can't cross the border for whatever reason, it's called domestic work. So what do you have? So we have 324,000 truckers in Canada, 124,000 crosses the border, while the remaining drivers are home daily every single day, or they're driving across Canada. To say you can't work as a trucker, you have a commercial driver's license. There's no excuse not to work, and there's no excuse not to have a job. If you have a commercial driver's license, you got a job for life. You're never going to be unemployed. If you're not happy with the company you're working for, work for another trucking company. If you don't want to cross the border anymore, you can stay home every single day and work for another trucking company. Like I do. And I'm home every single day. Yes, have done long haul trucking, 16 years of it, out of my over 30 years. Half of occupation have done long haul trucking. So she keeps bringing this up in her interviews, and it just irks me. It really irks me to have that false claim, that misinformation or disinformation. And then not use incredible news agencies. They said right front, we're not being interviewed by CBC or the National or any of these credible news agencies. They're going to use Rebel News and True North. And then one of her interviews too, and her first interview that she was doing with Jordan Peterson, who is, like I said, he was a clinical psychologist, and a very prominent one here in Ontario. No, I mean, it really surprised me. I mean, he even interviewed her. I mean, he would interview anybody, I'm pretty sure, to bring up his own ratings. That's what people do, try to do anyways. I've never really interviewed anybody. I'd like to sometime. I think that'd be pretty interesting. So she brings up one of in her first interview what she was doing um, with Jordan Peterson. Now I don't know if you've been on my show and I mentioned that to you, but I'll get you that. I can. It's on YouTube, and I'll tell you the name of the title of that in just a few moments here. But one of the doctors that she listened to was Dr. Brian Bertle here in Ontario. Another one was Dr. Malone. He's a, a scientist, and he was one of the scientists that worked on the mRNA vaccine. That vaccine just didn't magically appear. It was being worked on for years, by the way. But he felt he was being discredited for his work involved in the mRNA vaccines, and then himself starts spreading disinformation about the vaccine, and then he gets vaccinated. I don't know if Aaron Lynch even knows that, or anybody else even knows that. You can Google search that if you like. The Moderna vaccine, 2 doses, as a matter of fact. And another one was another doctor, a couple of doctors that here, I think they were out west. They were fired for spreading disinformation about the vaccine. And this Brian Bertles Bertles vaccine misinformation. So this is one of the doctors that she got her information from, and Dr. Malone, and somebody else here. It was Dr. Christian somebody. I can't even read my own for crying out loud. But anyway, now who he is, I don't know if he still is or not. Apparently this article says he's an associate professor at the Ontario Veterinary College of Universities of Guelph. She did mention Guelph, Ontario. He is not a medical doctor, nor is he a veterinarian. He's a bench scientist. And according to the court filings, Dr. Bridle has never treated infectious disease. He has never performed a human childhood vaccination, nor has he never treated a human adverse reaction to a vaccine. And he is in this interview doing this interview about the adverse reactions to a vaccine, which he has never treated anybody or any being to the adverse reaction of a vaccine. He is most well known for his claims about the distribution of toxicity of the spike protein. He's also made similar claims on Fox News. He's been a special guest and speaking at an event organized by this far-right German politician, Christine Anderson, whose views were called vile by conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, which is the leader of the Conservative Party here in Canada, and his support and appearance at the Freedom Convoy, aka Karen Carnival. Now, and of course, his claims, they were quickly rebutted by his peers, fellow scientists. He was discredited in a court case. This is, and she mentions this in her first interview. This is one of the doctors here and stuff like that. So of course I had to do my fact checking, right? Who are these people? Who are these doctors that she's talking about? And get the information. This is why, spreading disinformation and misinformation, creates doubts and confounds the truth. And this is why it's so important, because look at social media today. I mean, you go on Facebook, you go on YouTube, you go on, I don't know, all the social media outlets out there. People looking at articles and without even, well, maybe they read a little bit about it and they think it's really interesting or cool or something like that, and then they share it. Not even knowing, and maybe not even willfully spreading disinformation or misinformation. And then whatever they share turns out to be misinformation. Whether it's intent or not, it can be harmful. So, I try to take as much time as I possibly can. And even when when I go to, CBC News or the National or my local news station, I'm reading a story and stuff like that. And, why not question it? Why not research it a little bit further? Even on social media platforms, I peruse YouTube, right? And I like watching music video reactions. So people, bringing up a music video and they're reacting to that. That's that sort of stuff. I don't look for anything in particular, right? And and just by chance and by accident, you know and like I said, these two videos that propped up, and I'm going to tell you what they are, so that I can find out where my cursor's going here. And I can tell you both of them. It'll just take me 2 seconds here. What the titles of them. The first one she did, the truckers on the front lines of freedom. This is by B. Peterson. And this next one with her, Tamara Lynch, doing another video was on the Rubin report. This was just like a month ago. Now it says, now it can be told. That's the title. That runs for 30 minutes and 55 seconds. This first interview that she did is 1 hour and 48 minutes. If you want to sit through that, be my guest. And you can listen to my past couple episodes about that. And of course, talking about this one here, and just to mention a couple, like, this is the first time that I actually did a fact check on so-called Dr. Brian. But anyways, because I wasn't going to mention anything about him without doing any fact checking, and I wasn't going to mention anything about Rebel News or True North without doing any fact checking on these two news agencies that are not a prominent news agency. They're not like the National, the CBC, or the London news station here, or Toronto news stations. Hence the words rebel. That can say a million things about that, but anyways, that's why I said, okay, well, who's Rebel News? They never really, because she uses them, she mentions them and stuff like that. I'm thinking, well, who in the hell is Rebel News? I have to look them up, find out who they are. Who's True North? Had to look up, find out who they are. Do a little bit of fact checking. How credible are they? Well, they're not very credible. And I'll tell you why. Just real quick here, because I think I still have it saved here. And was it Sunday evening when I did my show? I think it was this one here. Oh, all right. So this was dated June 12th, 2023. This is on True North. Far website True North is spreading deceptive information about Canadian wildfires. How about disinformation? Okay, so this conspiratorial video linking wildfires to arson deceptively presents news stories from 2021 and 2022 as though if they occurred in 2023. So, a false claim. The far-right website True North claims that the government and climate zealots are hiding the real cause of recent wildfires across Canada, except for two key pieces of evidence. True North is presenting as smoking guns are from the wrong year. And in this video titled "The Truth About the Canadian Wildfires," True North, this presenter, I'm going to say his name because I don't give a shit, Harrison Faulkner, alleges there is a coordinated effort to suppress information about the real causes of the wildfire. And there's far more compelling case to be made about why all these fires are suddenly popping up, he says. And then he proceeds to walk viewers through his news articles, all published by mainstream corporate media outlets, to support his theory of an alleged cover-up of the truth of the 2023 Canadian wildfires were intentionally lit by arsonists. In Alberta, the RCMP, this is what he comes up with. In Alberta, the RCMP have charged one woman with 32 counts of arson after she incurred several wildfires in late April, citing a global news article that is actually dated June 4th, 2021, not 23. And later that month, another Alberta man was with 10 counts of arson for doing the exact same thing, Faulkner added, pointing to a news article that described events that took place in 2022, again last year, not 2023. Yeah, appalling people believe this dribble. right? Now, the rating, Harrison Faulkner claims that a global news article describing events that took place in 2021 and a Post media article describing events that took place in 2022 support his theory about the true cause of the 2023 Canadian wildfires are false because of this evidence is from the wrong year. This is so-called True North media outlets. You know, you're right, the lengths that they'll go through to avoid common sense. You know, so I mean, this is, you know, so during the so-called Freedom Convoy, when these organizers did a news press, the mainstream media was left out, and then they complained that they're not reporting on anything that is happening at ground zero, when in fact the mainstream media is there reporting what's happening on at ground zero, but they will only allow to have Rebel News and True North in their news conference. And even one in their news conference tomorrow, one of the organizers of the so-called Freedom Convoy stated that they are going to stay in Ottawa and not one day more until all mandates and restrictions are lifted. That would be the first weekend of this so-called Freedom Convoy, so something like January 28th. So she made it very clear that they're going to stay there for as long as it takes, and not one day more until all mandates and restrictions are lifted. Now, like I said, she's the only one of the organizers that actually has done any interviews. Nothing has come across my laptop from any other organizer. And they're all laying low because they're coming up on charges. Their court cases are coming up. Her court case is coming up in September. And in her last interview that she did on the Rubin Report, as I'm going through the video, it's only just a little over 30 minutes long. She turns around and says, you know, basically referring to the courts that they're messing with the wrong grandma. I guess we're going to find out. I guess we're going to find out whether these charges are going to stick. Charge of mischief, counseling mischief, obstructing police, counseling intimidation, intimidation by blocking and obstructing one or more roadways. She thinks this is a joke. You know, when she was being questioned back over because they had to do an inquiry, you know, after, you know, the Federal Emergency Act was invoked by the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So, you know, so after, you know, within 365 days, there has to be a hearing. So, you know, anybody, you know, like the organizers and citizens and business owners and government officials, and everybody, you know, would have their say. And when she's being questioned, about the horn blaring day in and day out, until a citizen, it took a citizen to go to court and get an injunction to stop the air horn blowing of the transport trucks. A citizen. The mayor of Ottawa couldn't go do that. Took a citizen to go do that. And then when all is said and done, and when that injunction came down, the only thing Tamara Lynch had to say about that is that, oh, finally we could hear our speakers. She didn't give a shit about the citizens. You can go on YouTube and you can search the Truckers Freedom Convoy and go through the videos and everything. There is a video posted there. It's a drone video, and that you can hear the horns of the transport trucks. I know how loud they are. I'm a trucker, but now you've got over 1,000 trucks doing this day in and day out. If that's not harassment, intimidation, and disturbing the peace, I don't know what the hell is. Oh, we weren't doing any of that. They don't think they've done anything wrong. Now, I started to say that, when they first started out, yeah, started a convoy going to protest. That was allowed, no problem. They allowed them into the downtown core around the Parliament buildings in Ottawa because in 2018 or 2019, they had like 100 trucks from Alberta protesting, the federal government, about the oil in Alberta and everything else like that. And they stayed for the weekend and then they left. So not only did we have, the truckers so the trucker convoy, the largest of the convoys coming from Alberta, from Ontario, from Quebec, from from the east, and so on, convoys. Because Ottawa is the capital of Canada. That's where the federal government is. So if people have issues, they go there to protest, and it's been like that forever and decades, and generally very peaceful. People come and say they're peace with their protesting, and they go home. They don't overstay welcome. When you start barricading the roadways with objects such as transport trucks and other vehicles, and you have no intentions of leaving, that's illegal. It's illegal to barricade a roadway. It's like you can't drive your car into the middle of the intersection, get out and lock the doors, and then just stand there. How long would it take for the police to show up to tell you to remove your car? And if you don't, they'll tow it for you. It's illegal, and you can be fined. Now, if they had just stayed there for the weekend on the Monday morning, we wouldn't even be talking about this. stay there for 3 weeks. Because, last January 2022, businesses were open. People could go to work, whether essential or not. The big mall downtown Ottawa opened up, and people, but we still had mandates in place. We had mask mandates in place, and protesters were running through the mall, intimidating and harassing shoppers and business owners. They even had protesters go to a homeless shelter and demanding food and assault the workers and assault a homeless person. Individual jumping up and down on of the tomb of the unknown soldier, defacing the Terry Fox statue. It only takes a few to spoil it for everybody else. And the truckers blaring their horns day and night. Hot tubs, bouncy castles, and big tents and stages for entertainment. That's a Canadian protest. And I'm not making that up. That's not a protest. You got to bring in the big tents and the bouncy castles and the hot tubs, these portable hot tubs. You're going to be there for a while. You're going to have your Canadian toques on, and you're going to be sitting in the hot tub drinking beer. Got the fires going and the cans to keep warm, because it was an actually very cold January into February of 2022. It was pretty frigid, right? That's not a protest. Oh, how you doing, ABC 7? Yeah, you can call in and we can talk in a minute. Sure, I've talked to him before.
Hi, Tucker. How you doing?
Hey, good. How you doing?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to tell you about. I want to say not good.
What's not good?
Um, 4 or 5 days ago or 6, I got depressed.
What's that?
That means I went into a deep depression.
Okay, sorry to hear that.
And if you don't know why I went into the deep depression, I will tell you. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
I went into deep depression because Emily is one of my friends that walked into my life, and she was the best, and she is a kind friend and sweet. And Emily is not here. Um, it's a story like I don't want to get into, but Emily is not here right now, and it's sad, and that's really bothering me because I do like her as a friend, and I miss her.
Yeah, that's really understandable when you have a friend and they're a good friend and they've been gone for some time, and I mean, it affects people in different ways, and like yourself, depressed about it.
This is yeah, some of it was my fault, but this is not all my fault. I know who fault it is, but I can't say on here. But
No.
I do miss Emily. And I wasn't the one that Emily I wasn't the one that took Emily away, but I do miss Emily. And when Emily does come back, I'm going to give her a hug as a friend because I do miss her.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't have to get into details and that. And I hope everything works out well for you.
Yeah, this is the first time I have like a decent friend because the original friend, like, there is Michael Suck.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I know how you feel. I mean, one thing though, we're gonna have people come and go in our lives, and we're gonna have best friends, and and we're gonna miss them, and stuff like that. And it does affect people in different ways when people move away, or they're gone away for a while and then they come back, and
I know,
so
I know,
I've
Tucker.
experienced it. Every experience is friends that come and go.
Yeah, I know Tucker Emily will come back, but as a friend to me. But when Emily was here at the time, I gave her a hug as a friend, and my hands were shaking because I gave her a hug. She gave me a hug as a friend, and I just broke down and cried.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's what I mean. We're only human beings, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, don't worry about it too much, and I'm sure things will work out.
Like both of us almost cry. When I cry, Emily wants to cry because both of us cry, and it was sweet. She said there's no need to cry. I'm here with you, and I'm not going to leave you as a friend. You know that.
Yeah, it's kind of comforting, right?
Yeah, I know that everything will be okay when Emily gave me a hug at the time. I know everything will be okay.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm calmer. I'm calmer with Emily, and Emily calms me down.
Well, that's good. That's good. It's nice to have a friend like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for calling
Yeah.
and sharing that a little bit and stuff like that. And you're going to be okay, and everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
All right.
But Tucker, yeah, I was depressed 6 days ago, but I still am depressed because, um, I'm not going to get into detail, but I still am depressed because of it. And the only thing been on my mind is Emily, and that's never going to go away. Like, um, I don't care what this person say or wherever this person is, but Emily will be my sweet teddy bear that I love as a friend.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Like
That's the thing.
you can't take feelings away. How can like somebody take a feeling away for that person?
Yeah, that no, they can't do that because it's a feeling,
Yeah.
right? It's not an object, so they can take an object away, they can't
Yeah.
take a feeling away.
Yeah, but this person said that
But
it's up to me. It's up to me to decide if you can. I hate to say this is not up to this person. It's up to me and Emily about talking. If talking, say we want to be friends. It's up to me and Emily, not to this person, because me and Emily have to talk it out together, and we have a say in this.
yes, yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So anyways, I hope it all works out well for you, and things works it can work itself out. So just hold in there, stay strong, and just see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I've been out here for an hour and almost 15 minutes now, and I'm getting ready to close the show. And I have to get up very early in the morning to head out to work. But I will be back on here tomorrow night between 9 and 9:30, and I will post that show up after I do this one and get this show out there. So
You
just take it
mean
easy.
you mean posted on YouTube?
No, it'll be up on it'll be edited, and it'll go out to all the social media outlets that it goes out to, where people wherever you listen to your podcast.
Oh, you mean like Instagram, Facebook?
It doesn't go out on. I don't post anything on Facebook. I have a private Facebook, right? It's just between family and stuff like that. So I mean, it'll go out on places like iHeartRadio and all those other social medias where people listen to their podcasts,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can go and Google search the Truckers Podcast FYI, and you'll see all the media sources that it is on. And it's on quite a few.
Okay. I wanted to do that. I was thinking of posting my podcast on iHeart, but I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, well, if you're on Podbean and it has, well, I can't leave my screen to do it because if I leave the screen, then it just cancels the show.
Oh,
But you can go on Podbean and it'll show you how it's done and stuff like that. So
okay.
yeah, so you take care of yourself and try not to overthink things too much, and I hope things work out for you.
Okay.
All right.
I know it's going to. I'm going to be happy. At yeah. At some point.
Yeah, and I want you to be happy, and the listeners want you to be happy.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
all right. So thanks for calling in. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have feelings, and feelings cannot be taken away from you. So I hope everything works out for ABC 7, and I hope everything works out for you. Have a good week, and hopefully you can come back out on the show at some point in time. I know you can't come out here every single night. You know that I did take a break. It was for personal reasons. And now I'm back doing my shows and back doing more of them. So I'll be out Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. I'll put 2 shows on Sunday, one in the morning and one in the evening. And I'll take Monday as a break. So that's what I want to do. So I hope you can. I know you can't for every single show. I mean, we all have lives to live, right? I work every single day. Weekends come along, we have our things to do because during the week sometimes we don't get everything done during the week. So we got weekend stuff going on. Um, Here across Canada, it's back to school shopping. School go back in September the 5th. It's only a couple of weeks away. I can't hardly even believe that. Summer vacation for students and of course people's vacations are coming to an end. I had my 2 weeks holidays, and there's like a month left of the summer season. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I don't know, maybe enjoy fall. Fall to me okay, but I know what's coming after that, and I'm not a winter fan. So fall is like September the 21st. So we're not that far off. Cooler days and shorter days are coming. So I'm just, I'm already looking forward to next year's vacation. So, anyways, thank you for joining me, ladies. I'm just rambling on here a little bit. Until we meet again, take care, be safe, enjoy the rest of your week, and thank you. This is Good night, everybody.